It's actually happening. As the deadline inches closer and closer, some brand new reports have dropped, including one recent one from Nick Kyprios, revealing some shocking details as it pertains to the Leafs' pursuit of Mikko Rantanen. We're going to break that down and discuss what this means going forward as Treliving prepares for something big. But before we get into it, if you're a part of the 70% who aren't subscribed to the channel, we're getting very close to 15,000 subscribers. So if you want to help us towards that goal, make sure to hit that subscribe button. And thank you guys again for your continued support here on the channel. But there's a lot to go over today. Now, obviously, we've been talking a lot on this channel about a bunch of different players, whether that be Mikko Rantanen, whether that be Scott Laughton, all these different guys. And a new report has dropped revealing some interesting information as it pertains to the Leafs and Mikko Rantanen. And it seems like it's a bit more of a reality than some fans out there may think. Let's dive right into the report here now. So there's a bunch of different things here. You can see it was an article dropped from Sportsnet just 9 days out from the NHL trade deadline. Nick Kyprios updates his trade board with some big names and writes about why St. Louis is a team to watch. We covered that yesterday in the Braden Shen, Luke Shen package saga with Colton Parayko and all these different things, even Scott Laughton, the Leafs being interested in. But in that article, he said this: don't rule out the Leafs either as it pertains to Mikko Rantanen, as they could acquire Rantanen as a bit of security in case Mitch Marner decides to head to free agency on July 1st. They could seamlessly replace Marner with Rantanen on a line with Matthews and could probably get an extension done. So exactly what we said here on the a couple of videos ago, but nonetheless, this is a kind of the first time an insider, and whether how high you have Nick Kyprios ranked on your insiders list is still it's up to you. But this is kind of the first report alongside Elliot Friedman's, of course, since then that has linked the Leafs to Mikko.
Yeah, well, Nick, you said it right there. This sounds awfully familiar. We've been covering Mikko Rantanen to the Leafs for about a week at this point, and this is exactly what I said last week, right? And I think that it's a very real possibility that this exact scenario happens, that the Leafs go out and get Mikko Rantanen, because obviously he's only going to be worth $2.3 million to take on this season. Obviously, you're going to have to pay a lot in terms of assets like prospects and maybe a first round pick. We know that. But if you can add him, you have your insurance policy for if Mitch Marner walks this summer, which we know at this point over the last couple of days, everything that's come out is a very real possibility as well. So you have a bit of an insurance policy. And I do think that Rantanen would be open to signing here. There's no pitch there. You get to, go for a Stanley Cup for the next couple of years, and you get to play with Austin Matthews. Like, I feel like he might be open to that. So it's going to be very interesting. And I think that the Leafs would be open to paying him as well. He's a Stanley Cup champion, right? Pretty accomplished player in his own right. So, this has been making the rounds now for a couple of days in terms of, the initial report from Friedman, the fact that we know that the Canes offered him a 9-figure contract that he didn't necessarily turn down, but he hasn't signed yet. So obviously still contemplating what he's going to do. And the deadline is next week at this point. It's a week away. So, he's got to make a decision pretty quickly here. And I think that it's a real possibility that the Canes move off of him, I should say.
Yeah, they offered him over $100 million. He said he doesn't know. And there's a lot of, also speculation out there that, the Hurricanes are almost forced to trade him in the sense of if they don't think they're a Stanley Cup contender, which I think most of us don't think they are, then you have to get some assets for him because they were the ones who went out. They gave up a lot of different players, Martin Necas and a bunch of other guys as well. You start to look at it now, and like Nick Kyprios says here, it is interesting because, yes, he would be able to replace Mitch Marner on in the free agency market if they both hit it. But even not, let's say Mitch Marner leaves, you have Mikko Rantanen, who, like you mentioned, he's used to playing with high-level talent, top-line guys, Nathan MacKinnon, players like that, and that's where he thrives. It's where he had his 100-point seasons, and now with the Hurricanes, a bit less of that high-end talent. He could come over to the Leafs, sign an extension, see how he does this season as well, and I think whether or not they make the trade for him this offseason, this is going to be the #1 free agency target for the Leafs as it pertains to a really, high-end talent, but depending what they do with Mitch Marner, and the reports have come out since, our last video on Mikko Rantanen, a bunch of different things, it doesn't seem like they're going to extend Mitch Marner in the offseason. So getting Mikko Rantanen now would not only increase your cup chances for this season, but beyond as well, and reliable option in case and assuming Mitch Marner leaves.
And I think a lot of people are forgetting who Mikko Rantanen is. Like, the disrespect to Mikko Rantanen I've seen online the last week or so is incredible. Like, this is a really, really good player. And even if you don't have the opportunity to re-sign him, if you look at this objectively, the Leafs are trying to win a Stanley Cup this season, and there's an opportunity in front of you for you to acquire a Stanley Cup champion who's one of the best players in the league. He really is, right? If you look at his point totals this year, he's having a fantastic year. Obviously, it hasn't been going well in Carolina since he's got traded. There's a lot of factors, to contribute to that. But if you can acquire him even for this season, he really helps you out this year in this year's playoffs. Obviously, you'd be giving up a lot just for a rental. That would be pretty insane, of course, but he only makes 2.3. You should seriously consider bringing him on for this playoff run. And again, like I said, I think he'd really be open to re-signing with the Leafs because I think the Leafs have more of a future. They have more of a defined plan and where they want to go with the team as is right now than the Carolina Hurricanes, right? There's a lot up in the air for the Carolina Hurricanes. So I think that it would make sense for him to re-sign here. And again, everything we've heard the last couple of days, I do think it's a bit of negotiation through the media for Mitch Marner and his camp. I do believe that. But there is a real world where he doesn't re-sign, and then what, right? And then what? Right? You can use that money to go sign other players, but are they going to make a difference? I think that you still want a top end player like a Mikko Rantanen. And again, I think he's a fantastic player, and a lot of people forget, he plays in all situations as well, right? He plays power play time. He can play on the penalty kill, right? He can actually play center as well, which is another thing that, if you need him to, if he has to work on his face-off percentage, that's another thing where maybe you replace John Tavares with Mikko Rantanen in this 2C slot going forward.
Yeah, you can see this here. The Leafs may not be ruled out as a potential scenario to acquire Mikko Rantanen, and maybe McKinnon one day in the far future. But yeah, like you mentioned, Rantanen 28, 66 points, 26 goals, 40 assists in 55 games played. He's over a point per game player, well over a point per game player in his career, especially over the past few seasons. And whether or not you consider him, because I've seen some discourse online in the comments, whether or not you consider him a superstar, a top 5 player, whatever you want to be, he is going to help this Toronto Maple Leafs team very much if they acquire him, obviously. And this would be the biggest acquisition that they could make in the, at the deadline. And letting that aside, if you go out and you get a guy like Mikko Rantanen, let's say it costs, a lot of picks and Easton Cowan and all that, you can still pivot, hopefully, and have some other assets to address still the third line center spot, the fourth line center spot, if they're really trying to go all in. We've been hearing about how Brad Treliving is going all in. Darren Dreger as well, as the Mikko Rantanen contemplates his future. The speculation builds. The Canes clearly want to extend him and are constantly communicating, but Rantanen remains unsure. I mean, as the days go on, week or so away, a bit over a week away from the deadline, this is going to be the number one guy to follow. And if they decide to not trade him and they try to keep him and hopefully extend him, then there is still some other options as well. But I think a lot of this is going to boil down to when the deadline inches closer and closer, because let's not forget, there's still guys like Dylan Cousins, players of that caliber, hopefully going to become available. But the pressure's not on quite yet for either the Canes or the other teams.
And not just that. I mean, we know if you look at Puckpedia or any of these tools for the salary cap, you know that, as you wait closer to the deadline, you have more cap space to kind of work with. Players' contracts are worth a little bit less in some cases as well. So I think that the Leafs are going to probably wait till next week. I don't think they're going to make a trade tomorrow or Friday, anything like that. It is definitely possible if they find their guy and they come to an agreement, sure, but we haven't heard anything that is too close, right? They're still kicking tires on a lot of guys. So I think it's going to be at some point next week, probably closer to the actual deadline, but I don't think they're going to wait for the deadline. I feel like something is going to happen maybe this weekend, including a different team, and then the Leafs will probably get to work. And I say get to work. Obviously, they've been putting things together and calling other GMs. I'm sure Brad Treliving's been doing that, but I think they'll actually start pulling the trigger on some trades early next week because they're going to have to. They're going to have to. And I think Mikko Rantanen is a great option. It would be exciting. Like, that's a blockbuster trade if the Leafs were able to get Mikko Rantanen and extend him. It would make things very, very interesting, especially with Mitch Marner. So it's going to be crazy. I see a lot of people saying that, it's just not going to happen. He's probably going to stay in Carolina. I'm not so sure. They've offered him exactly what he asked for in Colorado, and he has not said yes yet.
Yep, we're seeing here fans want them. They're eager for the Leafs to go all in. We know they're interested in going all in. If you add Mikko Rantanen to this lineup, I mean, whether you have him on the first line, the second line, let's not forget also something that people haven't mentioned much. He would help the power play immensely, which is something that this team desperately needs. Even though you'd think they have all the talent in the world, I think just a shakeup, it would help that there. You add a guy like Rantanen, you add a guy like Luke Shen, and then you're cooking with fire here. But that'll wrap it up. Let me know down below what your thoughts are. Let us know. Do you want to see Mikko Rantanen on the Leafs? A bunch of new reports are coming out. We're gonna keep you up to date with all the latest news. So make sure to hit the subscribe button. Cheers.